Have you ever witnessed cruelty and remained silent? That moment when laughter turns venomous, when entertainment comes at the expense of another's dignity? Today's story delves into the shadowed corners of our humanity, where mockery meets mercy, where judgment confronts grace. In a world obsessed with appearance and status, we often overlook the profound treasures hidden in the most unexpected vessels. This tale might break your heart before it heals it, but I promise you'll discover a truth about compassion that could change how you see every stranger on your path tomorrow. The four teenagers moved like a synchronized pack through the narrow alley, their polished school shoes clicking against the cobblestones, their crisp uniforms marking them as students of St. Catherine's Academy, the most prestigious private school in Westbrook. Alexandra Hamilton led the group, her honey-blonde hair captured in a perfect ponytail, her blazer adorned with academic pins that caught the afternoon light. Behind her walked the twins, Olivia and Isabella Morrison, identical in appearance, but distinctly different in demeanor, Olivia perpetually frowning, Isabella constantly smirking. Thomas Wright brought up the rear, his height making him tower over the girls, his expensive watch, a 16th birthday gift from absent parents, glinting on his wrist. "Shortcuts faster," Alexandra announced, checking her phone. "We're already late for volunteer hours." Her voice carried the confident tone of someone accustomed to being obeyed. The others followed without question through the narrow passage between brick buildings that housed businesses far too expensive for ordinary people to frequent. The alley wasn't empty. An old man sat hunched against the wall, his weathered hands folded atop each other, his grey suit worn at the elbows and knees. Despite the shabby appearance of his clothing, there was something peculiar about his posture, a certain dignity that seemed at odds with his surroundings. His eyes, cloudy with age, stared at some middle distance, seeing something beyond the brick walls and garbage bins. "Ugh," Olivia muttered, wrinkling her nose. "Can't the police keep these people off the streets? My father pays enough taxes." The old man didn't move, didn't acknowledge their presence, continuing to stare forward as though in meditation or prayer. "Maybe he's dead," Isabella suggested with a nervous giggle that ricocheted off the brick walls. "Don't be stupid," Alexandra said, slowing her pace as they approached. "He's breathing." She studied him with clinical detachment. Probably drunk. Thomas, last in line, found himself staring at the old man's hands, gnarled with age but curiously clean, with neatly trimmed fingernails. Not the hands of someone who lived on the streets. The old man's shoes, though worn, were made of real leather, once expensive. Thomas opened his mouth to point this out, but closed it when Alexandra suddenly stopped. "Look at his face," she whispered, a cruel smile spreading across her features. "He looks terrified." Indeed, the old man's expression had changed. His eyes had widened, his mouth slightly open as though frozen mid-word. But Thomas wasn't convinced it was fear he saw in those weathered features. It seemed more like recognition. Alexandra crouched down, her expensive perfume mingling with the alley's musty air. "Hello? Anyone home?" She waved her hand in front of the man's face. When he didn't respond, she turned to her friends. "I think he's totally out of it." The four teenagers surrounded the old man, crouching down to his level. Alexandra reached out and gently pushed his shoulder, making him sway slightly. "Earth to Grandpa," she said, her voice honeyed with mock concern. "Are you lost? Did you escape from the nursing home?" The twins giggled, and even Thomas felt a smile tugging at his lips despite the unease churning in his stomach. The old man's hands trembled slightly, but he remained silent, his gaze now fixed on Alexandra's face with an intensity that should have warned her. But Alexandra, buoyed by her friend's attention and the power she felt in that moment, didn't notice the shift. "Maybe he's deaf," Isabella suggested, reaching out to touch his worn collar. "Look at this ancient suit. It's practically falling apart." "Don't touch him," Thomas said suddenly. "You don't know where he's been." "Exactly," Olivia agreed, pulling her sister back. "He probably has diseases." Alexandra, not to be outdone, pulled out her phone. This is too good. Hold on. She positioned herself next to the old man, her arm extended for a selfie. Come on, guys, get in the picture. My followers will love this. The teenagers pressed in closer, surrounding the old man like predators, their young faces alight with cruel amusement as they positioned themselves for the photo. The old man remained motionless, only his eyes moving, scanning each of their faces as though committing them to memory. "Say homeless," Alexandra commanded, and the flash went off, capturing the moment. 4 privileged teenagers in their pristine uniforms crowded around an elderly man whose dignity remained intact despite their mockery. Only Thomas noticed the single tear that traced a path down the old man's cheek. "Let me see," Olivia demanded, reaching for Alexandra's phone. "Oh my God, he looks so scared. This is hilarious." "We should probably go," Thomas said, standing up and adjusting his backpack. "We're going to be late." "One more," Alexandra insisted, positioning her phone again. This time, everyone point at him like he's an exhibit. They did as instructed, fingers extended toward the silent figure, their laughter echoing in the narrow space between buildings. The old man closed his eyes. "Did you get a good one?" Isabella asked, peering at Alexandra's screen. "Perfect," Alexandra confirmed, already typing. #found a fossil, #street decoration. Thomas stepped back, a heaviness settling in his chest. "We really need to go." "Fine," Alexandra sighed, standing and brushing invisible dirt from her skirt. "Bye, Grandpa. Thanks for the content." As they turned to leave, the old man spoke, his voice soft but surprisingly clear, carrying an accent Thomas couldn't quite place. "You have your mother's eyes, Alexandra." The teenagers froze. Alexandra turned slowly, her expression shifting from amusement to confusion. "What did you say?" "Your mother," the old man repeated, his gaze steady now, "had the same eyes. Beautiful but cold when she was cruel, warm when she chose kindness. The choice was always hers, as it is now yours." Alexandra's face paled. "How do you know my mother?" The old man didn't answer, his attention shifting to the twins. "The Morrison girls. Your grandfather would be disappointed. He built that company with integrity, not mockery." Olivia stepped back, bumping into her sister. "How do you know our name?" "And Thomas," the old man continued, his gaze finally landing on the tall boy who stood slightly apart from the others. "Your father didn't abandon you by choice." Thomas felt as though the ground had shifted beneath his feet. His father had left when Thomas was 7. No explanation, no goodbye. Just gone one morning, leaving his mother to raise him alone. "Who are you?" Thomas whispered. The old man slowly rose to his feet, his movements careful, but not frail. Standing, he was taller than expected, his posture straightening as though shedding years with each inch. "My name is Solomon Pierce." The name hung in the air between them, meaningless to the teenagers but delivered with such gravity that none dared to laugh. "You don't know me," Solomon continued, "but I know each of you. I've watched you grow from a distance. I've seen your choices, your cruelties, your occasional mercies." He reached into his worn jacket and removed a small, leather-bound notebook. "I've kept track." "This is insane," Alexandra declared, though her voice lacked its usual confidence. "You're just some crazy old man. You don't know anything about us." Solomon opened the notebook and read, "September 12th. Alexandra Hamilton orchestrated the social exclusion of Eliza Foster after learning Eliza had been offered the lead in the school play. Methods included spreading rumors of illness and manipulating mutual friends. Eliza cried in the third-floor bathroom for 40 minutes. No teachers intervened. Alexandra's face drained of color. How could you possibly know that? Solomon turned a page. October 7th. Olivia and Isabella Morrison deliberately damaged Rachel Klein's science project the night before submission. Rachel received a failing grade. The twins received highest marks in the class. The sisters exchanged alarmed glances. November 3rd. Thomas Wright witnessed James Parker being bullied behind the gymnasium. He walked away. Thomas felt his throat tighten. He'd never told anyone about that day. about the shame that had followed him home and kept him awake that night. "Who are you?" Alexandra demanded again, her voice higher now, edged with fear. Solomon closed the notebook and returned it to his pocket. "I told you. My name is Solomon Pierce. I was once the janitor at St. Catherine's Academy." "The janitor?" Olivia repeated incredulously. "That's impossible. You'd have to be very old." Solomon finished for her with a small smile. "Yes, I am that. But you're not just a janitor," Thomas said slowly, realization dawning. "No janitor would know all those things about us." "Observant, Thomas. Good." Solomon nodded approvingly. "No, I was more than a janitor, much more. But that story will come later." He looked at each of them in turn. "Right now you have a choice to make. You can continue on your way, dismiss me as a delusional old man, and proceed with your lives unchanged. Or what?" Isabella asked, unable to mask her curiosity. "Or you can meet me tomorrow at noon, at the abandoned cathedral on 7th Street. I have something to show you, something that belongs to each of you, whether you know it or not." "That place has been closed for years," Thomas said. "It's condemned." "The building may be condemned," Solomon agreed, "but what it contains is very much alive." He reached out suddenly, causing the teenagers to flinch, but he merely adjusted Alexandra's school tie, which had become slightly askew. "Appearances can be deceiving. Isn't that the lesson of today?" With those words, he stepped past them and walked away, his gait steady and purposeful, leaving 4 stunned teenagers in his wake. "That was beyond weird," Olivia finally said, breaking the silence. "He's obviously mentally ill," Alexandra declared, though her voice trembled slightly. "He probably heard us say our names and made up the rest." "But he knew things," Isabella countered. "Private things." "Coincidence," Alexandra insisted. "Or lucky guesses. People like that are good at reading people." Thomas remained silent, his thoughts racing. The old man, Solomon, had mentioned his father, not abandoned by choice. What did that mean? "We're not actually considering going tomorrow, are we?" Olivia asked, looking at each of her friends. "Absolutely not," Alexandra said firmly. "That would be insane. He's just a crazy old man." "Totally crazy," Isabella agreed quickly. Thomas said nothing. They continued their journey in uncomfortable silence, the encounter having cast a shadow over their afternoon. At the community center, where they performed their mandatory volunteer hours, they separated to different stations, Alexandra to the reception desk, the twins to the children's area, and Thomas to the food bank in the basement. As Thomas sorted canned goods, his mind kept returning to the old man's words. "Your father didn't abandon you by choice." After 9 years of silence, of birthdays and Christmases without so much as a card, Thomas had built a wall around that wound. Now, a stranger's words threatened to crack its foundation. When his shift ended, Thomas found himself walking alone, deliberately taking a longer route to avoid passing through the alley again. His phone buzzed with messages from the group chat. "Alexandra, everyone forget about that weirdo, okay? He was just a homeless creep." Olivia, "Totally. So gross." Isabella, "Did anyone else notice he knew things, though? Like specific things?" Alexandra, "Stop. He was guessing. Drop it." Thomas slipped the phone back into his pocket without responding. At home, his mother greeted him with her usual tired smile, her nurse's scrubs wrinkled from a 12-hour shift. "How was volunteering?" she asked, stirring something on the stove that smelled comfortingly of childhood. "Fine," Thomas answered automatically. Then after a pause, "Mom, did Dad ever reach out after he left?" The spoon stopped moving. His mother turned, her expression carefully composed. "Why do you ask that now?" Thomas shrugged, attempting casualness. "Just wondering." She studied him for a long moment before turning back to the stove. "Finish your homework before dinner. We can talk later." But later never came. After dinner, his mother received an emergency call from the hospital and had to return for a night shift. Thomas sat alone in his bedroom, staring at his phone, at the continuing conversation in the group chat. "Isabella, But what if he really has something for us? Alexandra. Like what? Tetanus? A mugging? Use your brain. Olivia. Alex is right. Only an idiot would go to an abandoned building to meet a stranger. Isabella. I'm just curious. Alexandra. Curious makes stupid in this case. Subject closed. Thomas turned off his phone and pulled out a box from under his bed, a collection of the few items he had of his father's. A baseball, a watch that no longer worked, a single photograph of a younger version of his father holding infant Thomas, looking at the camera with an expression of pure joy, not the face of a man planning to disappear. The next morning at school, the four friends avoided discussing the incident, though Thomas noticed Alexandra checking her social media obsessively, perhaps worried the old man might somehow appear there. The twins were uncharacteristically quiet. Only in chemistry class, when they were paired for lab work, did Isabella lean close to Thomas and whisper, "Are you going today?" "Going where?" Thomas asked, carefully measuring liquid into a beaker. "You know where," Isabella replied, her voice barely audible. "The cathedral, at noon." Thomas focused on the measurement, avoiding her gaze. "That would be crazy." "Yeah," she agreed quickly, "totally crazy." Then, after a pause, "But he knew things, Thomas. Things he couldn't have guessed." Thomas said nothing, but as the morning progressed, he found himself checking the clock with increasing frequency. At 11:40, he raised his hand in English class and asked to use the restroom. Once in the hallway, he hesitated only briefly before heading toward the side exit. Outside, the spring air carried the scent of new beginnings. Thomas walked quickly, his heart racing with each step. The abandoned cathedral loomed ahead, its Gothic architecture impressive even in decay. As he approached the chained front gates, he noticed they were slightly ajar, just enough for a person to slip through. "So, you came." Thomas startled at the voice behind him. Alexandra stood there, her school blazer exchanged for a hoodie, as though she'd attempted to disguise herself. "I thought this was stupid and dangerous," Thomas said, unable to keep the surprise from his voice. Alexandra's cheeks colored slightly. "I'm just making sure you don't get murdered. Someone has to be responsible." She glanced at the cathedral. "Have you gone in yet?" "I just got here." A rustling sound from the bushes nearby made them both turn. The twins emerged, looking equally sheepish. "Great," Alexandra sighed. "The whole idiot committee is present." "You're here too," Olivia pointed out. "As a responsible observer," Alexandra insisted. "Nothing more." They stood awkwardly, each unwilling to admit their curiosity had overwhelmed their better judgment. Finally, Thomas moved toward the gate. "Well, we're all here now. Might as well see what this is about." The gate creaked as he pushed it wider, the sound echoing in the empty courtyard beyond. The cathedral itself was magnificent despite its state of disrepair. Towering spires reaching toward the heavens, intricate stonework telling biblical stories to those who knew how to read them. The massive wooden doors stood slightly open, a sliver of darkness between them. "I don't like this," Olivia murmured, but she followed as Thomas led the way across the courtyard. The interior of the cathedral was not what they expected. Rather than darkness and decay, soft light filtered through stained glass windows, illuminating a space that seemed well-maintained, almost lived in. Candles flickered on various surfaces, creating pools of golden light. The pews had been rearranged to form a small circle near the altar, and in the center stood Solomon Pierce, no longer in his shabby grey suit, but dressed in simple black clothing that somehow lent him an air of authority. "Welcome," he said, his voice echoing slightly in the vast space. "I'm glad you all came." "How is this place not condemned inside?" Alexandra demanded, looking around in confusion. "From outside it looks like it's falling apart." "Appearances," Solomon reminded her with a small smile. "Please, sit." They moved cautiously to the pews, sitting together on one side, facing Solomon across the circle. "Before I show you what I've promised," Solomon began, "I must tell you a story. My story." He gestured to the cathedral around them, "and the story of this place." "Is this going to take long?" Alexandra asked, though her usual sharpness was tempered with genuine curiosity. "Time," Solomon said, "is something I've come to understand differently than most." He sat across from them, his posture straight, his eyes clear and focused. "I was born in 1877. Isabella let out a nervous laugh. "That would make you 148 years old," Solomon finished. "Yes, that's impossible," Thomas said flatly. "Many things seem impossible until they're explained," Solomon replied. "Let me start again. I was born in 1877, the son of a carpenter. My father built much of the woodwork in this very cathedral." He gestured to the ornate carvings that adorned the altar. "I followed in his footsteps for a time, but I was called to a different purpose." He reached into his pocket and removed an ancient-looking key, which he placed on a small table before them. "In 1900, I became the keeper of the Cathedral of St. Catherine. Not a priest, not a deacon, but something else entirely. I was entrusted with a gift and a responsibility." "What gift?" Thomas asked, despite himself. Solomon's eyes met his. "The gift of witness, Thomas. The ability to see, truly see, the souls of others, to record their deeds, both light and dark, to maintain the balance." "This is crazy," Alexandra declared, standing abruptly. "You're saying you're some kind of, what, angel? Demon?" "Neither," Solomon said calmly. "Just a man, chosen for a task I didn't fully understand at first. Please sit, there's more." Alexandra remained standing for a moment longer before slowly returning to her seat. "For over a century, I've watched this city. I've observed generations come and go. I've kept records of choices made, of kindnesses offered and withheld. When the cathedral was officially closed in 1972, I remained its keeper. When your school was built in 1983, I took the position of janitor to remain close to my charge." "Your charge?" Olivia asked. In answer, Solomon stood and walked to a section of the floor near the altar. He knelt and pressed his palm against one of the stones. To the teenager's astonishment, the stone began to glow faintly, then shifted, revealing steps leading downward. "Come," Solomon said, descending the stairs. "What I have to show you is below." The teenagers exchanged uncertain glances. "This is how horror movies start," Isabella whispered. "We could leave," Olivia suggested. Thomas stood. "I'm going down." Without waiting for the others, he followed Solomon into the passage. After a moment's hesitation, Alexandra followed, and then the twins, clinging to each other as they descended the stone steps. The chamber below was circular, its walls lined with thousands of small drawers, like an ancient filing system. In the center stood a pedestal bearing a large leather-bound book, its pages glowing with a soft golden light that illuminated the space. "The Book of Witness," Solomon explained, approaching the pedestal. "Every soul born in this city has a page, every significant choice recorded." "That's impossible," Alexandra breathed, her skepticism momentarily forgotten in the face of the extraordinary sight before her. "See for yourself," Solomon invited, opening the book. As the pages turned, names flickered across them in script that seemed to shift and change, sometimes appearing as modern type, sometimes as ancient calligraphy. He stopped at a page and beckoned Alexandra forward. "Your page, Miss Hamilton." Alexandra approached cautiously, her eyes widening as she looked down at the book. The others couldn't see what was written there, but they watched as her expression transformed from disbelief to shock to something like shame. "Every cruel word," Solomon said softly. "Every kindness. The time you gave your lunch to a homeless woman when you thought no one was looking. The time you deliberately tripped a classmate who had been chosen for a role you wanted." Alexandra stepped back, her face pale. "How is this possible?" Solomon turned more pages, stopping at different points. "The Morrison twins." He gestured for them to approach. The sisters moved forward together, their usual confidence absent as they peered at their pages. "Olivia, your protection of your sister, admirable. Your willingness to blame others for your joint actions, less so. Isabella, your moments of compassion, beautiful. Your eagerness to follow the crowd, troubling. The twins returned to their seats without speaking, their expressions stunned. Finally, Solomon turned to Thomas. Your page, Mr. Wright. Thomas approached slowly, uncertain what he would find. The page glowed before him, covered in flowing script that detailed his life, not just actions but thoughts, fears, hopes. He saw his childhood written there, his mother's struggles, his own loneliness, and then a section that made his heart stop. My father, he whispered. Yes, Solomon confirmed. The truth you were never told. Thomas read silently, his hands beginning to tremble. His father hadn't abandoned them willingly. He had been diagnosed with early-onset dementia at 33, a rare and aggressive form. Rather than subject his young son to watching his decline, he had chosen to disappear, extracting a promise from Thomas's mother never to reveal the truth. He had died 3 years later in a care facility, 2 states away. He loved you, Solomon said gently. His last words were your name. Thomas felt tears streaming down his face, but made no move to wipe them away. 9 years of anger and abandonment issues shifted inside him, rearranging themselves around this new truth. Why show us this? Alexandra asked, her voice uncharacteristically subdued. Why us? Why now? Solomon closed the book carefully and turned to face them. Because the time has come for me to pass on my responsibility. I have watched and waited for the right souls, young enough to serve long, flawed enough to understand mercy, strong enough to bear the weight of witness. You're saying you want one of us to take over your job? Isabella asked incredulously. Not one, Solomon corrected. All of you together. The task has grown too large for a single keeper. That's insane, Alexandra said, though without conviction. We're just teenagers. We have college plans, futures. Ah, and you will have them, Solomon assured her. The gift does not consume your life, it enriches it. You will see others, truly see them, in ways few can. You will understand the weight of choices, the ripple effects of actions. You will learn to guide without controlling, to witness without judging. And if we refuse? Olivia asked. Solomon's expression grew somber. Then I must find others. But I have watched you for years. Despite your flaws, perhaps because of them, you are suited for this task. He looked at each of them in turn. Alexandra, your leadership. Olivia, your protective nature. Isabella, your curiosity. Thomas, your quiet strength. Together, you could become something extraordinary. I don't understand what you're asking us to do, Thomas said. Record people's sins, judge them. Not judge, Solomon corrected firmly. Witness, record, and occasionally, when the moment is right, guide. As I guided you to that alley yesterday, knowing you would mock an old man, knowing that mockery would lead you here, the teenagers exchanged glances as understanding dawned. You planned that? Alexandra asked. You wanted us to be cruel to you? I needed to show you your capacity for cruelty, Solomon explained. And now I need to show you your capacity for something greater. He gestured to 4 small drawers near the book. Your inheritances await. Hesitantly they approached. Each drawer had a name inscribed upon it in flowing script. Alexandra reached for hers first, sliding it open to reveal a small, crystal vial containing what appeared to be liquid light. What is it? She whispered. The essence of witness, Solomon replied. A drop on your tongue will open your eyes to the true nature of souls. You will see beyond masks, beyond pretense. You will know truth. The twins opened their drawers simultaneously, finding identical vials. Thomas was the last, his hand hovering over his drawer before finally pulling it open. Inside lay a vial like the others, but beside it was a folded piece of paper. He opened it to find a note in unfamiliar handwriting. For my son, who carries my name and my heart, forgive my absence. I am with you always. Thomas closed his eyes, a weight he'd carried for 9 years finally lifting. "This is your gift," Solomon said, addressing all of them now. "The gift of true sight, the responsibility of witness, the power to help guide souls toward light through understanding rather than judgment." He gestured to the book. "And this would be your charge, to maintain the balance, to record the deeds of this city for another generation." "Do we decide now?" Isabella asked, holding her vial carefully. "You have until midnight," Solomon replied. "Return here with your decision. All must agree, or none may serve. The choice must be unanimous and freely made." They left the cathedral in silence, each lost in thought, the small vials carefully tucked away in pockets or bags. As they reached the gate, Alexandra finally spoke. "This can't be real," she said, but her tone suggested she no longer believed her own denials. "You saw the book," Thomas replied quietly. "You saw what was written there. Things no one could know." "It could be an elaborate trick," Olivia suggested without conviction. "For what purpose?" Isabella countered. "He's not asking for money or anything tangible. Just our lives," Alexandra said, "our futures." "He said we could still have normal lives," Thomas reminded her. "College, careers, everything we planned. With the small addition of being some kind of supernatural record keepers," Alexandra added sarcastically. They parted ways at the street corner, agreeing to meet again at 11 that night to return to the cathedral together, regardless of their individual decisions. Thomas walked home slowly, his mind replaying everything he'd learned. His father had loved him, had protected him in the only way he knew how. The knowledge filled an emptiness Thomas hadn't fully acknowledged until now. At home, his mother was preparing for her shift, rushing around the kitchen in her scrubs. She stopped when she saw his expression. "Thomas, what's wrong?" He didn't answer directly. Instead, he asked, "Why didn't you tell me about Dad's condition?" The color drained from her face. "How did you—" "It doesn't matter," Thomas said gently. "I know now. I know he didn't abandon us by choice." His mother sank into a chair, her professional composure crumbling. "He made me promise. He didn't want you to see him deteriorate, to remember him that way. He wanted you to have happy memories, not—" She wiped away tears. "I kept his letters for you. For when you were older, I never found the right time. I'd like to read them," Thomas said, "when you're ready." She nodded, studying him with a mixture of relief and curiosity. "You seem different today." Thomas considered this. "I think I am." He touched the vial in his pocket, feeling its subtle warmth. "I think I understand some things better now." Across town, Alexandra sat in her bedroom, surrounded by the trappings of privilege, designer clothes, expensive electronics, photos of her popular friends. She took out the vial and held it up to the light, watching the luminous liquid shift and swirl within. She opened her laptop and pulled up the photos from yesterday, the cruel selfies with the old man. Looking at them now, she felt a shame she'd never experienced before. In the images, Solomon's eyes held no fear as she'd initially thought, but a profound sadness and knowing. He had seen through her, even then. Alexandra had spent years cultivating an image of perfection. Perfect grades, perfect appearance, perfect social standing. The thought of seeing others as they truly were terrified her, because it meant they might see her too. All her carefully constructed walls, her manipulations, her cruelties disguised as leadership, exposed. She closed the laptop and lay back on her bed, the vial clutched in her hand. Could she bear the weight of such sight? Could she face the truth of herself and others? In their shared bedroom, the twins sat cross-legged on their respective beds, their vials placed between them. "Do you think it would change us?" Olivia asked, breaking the silence that had lasted since they'd returned home. "I think we're already changing," Isabella replied thoughtfully. "Just knowing all this exists, doesn't that change everything?" Olivia nodded slowly. "I keep thinking about all the things we've done, the people we've hurt. If it's all recorded somewhere, not just the bad things," Isabella reminded her. "The good too. Remember what he said about your protection, about my compassion. We could do better." Olivia said quietly. Be better. Together, Isabella agreed, reaching for her sister's hand. As 11 o'clock approached, the four teenagers converged on the street corner as planned. No one spoke as they walked to the cathedral, the night air cool against their faces. The gate stood open, as though expecting them. Inside, candles still flickered, and Solomon waited by the altar, his expression serene. "You've returned," he observed. "Have you made your decision?" The teenagers exchanged glances. Alexandra stepped forward first. "Before I decide," she said, "I need to know something. Yesterday, in the alley, you said I have my mother's eyes, that they're cold when I'm cruel." She swallowed hard. "Am I like her, destined to be cold and manipulative like she is?" Solomon's gaze was gentle. "Destiny is not inheritance, Alexandra. Your mother made her choices. You will make yours. The eyes are the same, but the soul behind them is uniquely yours." Alexandra nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. "I've decided. I'll accept the responsibility." Solomon turned to the twins. "Olivia, Isabella." The sisters looked at each other, communicating silently as they often did. Isabella spoke for both of them. "We'll do it. Together." Finally, Solomon looked at Thomas. "And you, Thomas Wright." Thomas touched the pocket where he kept his father's note. "I have one question. My father, is he at peace?" Solomon's expression softened. "He is, and he is proud of the man you're becoming." Thomas nodded, his decision made. "Then I accept." Solomon smiled, a genuine expression of joy that transformed his weathered face. "Then it is time." He led them down to the chamber below, where the Book of Witness still glowed on its pedestal. "The ritual is simple," Solomon explained. "A drop of the essence on your tongue, and then you place your hand upon the book. The rest will happen naturally." Alexandra stepped forward first, her usual need to lead asserting itself even now. She uncorked her vial with trembling fingers and allowed a single drop to fall on her tongue. Her eyes widened immediately, and she gasped, her gaze darting around the room as though seeing it, and them, for the first time. "What do you see?" Isabella asked anxiously. "Everything," Alexandra whispered. "I see everything." She approached the book and placed her palm upon its glowing surface. Light surged up her arm, surrounding her briefly before settling into her skin like a luminous tattoo that faded slowly from view. The twins went next, taking their drops simultaneously. They clutched each other as the change took hold, their expressions a mixture of awe and terror. When they touched the book together, the light enveloped them both, connecting them briefly before sinking beneath their skin. Thomas was last, studying his vial for a long moment before taking the drop. The sensation was indescribable, not a taste, but a knowing that spread from his tongue throughout his being. Colors became deeper, sounds clearer. He could see the light within his friends now, pulsing with their emotions, their histories, their potential futures branching out like golden threads. When he placed his hand on the book, the connection was immediate and profound. He saw generations of keepers before him, stretching back centuries. He saw Solomon as a young man, receiving this same gift. He saw his own life, not just as it had been, but as it could be. A keeper, a witness, a guide. As the light faded into his skin, Solomon approached them, his own inner light dimmer now, as though transferred. "It is done," he said softly. "You are the new keepers of witness. The book is yours to maintain, the records yours to keep, the balance yours to protect." "What happens to you now?" Thomas asked. Solomon smiled. "I rest. After 123 years of service, I am permitted my reward." He looked upward, toward the cathedral ceiling and beyond. "I will see my Catherine again, my beloved wife, gone these many years." "Catherine," Alexandra repeated. "As in St. Catherine's?" "The cathedral was named for her," Solomon confirmed. "She was the first keeper I knew. My guide, my love, my light." His expression grew distant, remembering. "She showed me that true witness comes not from judgment, but from love, Remember that, always. See with love, record with mercy, guide with compassion. He began to fade before their eyes, his form becoming translucent, his inner light growing stronger as his physical presence diminished. "Your first test comes soon," he told them, his voice now seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere. "The richest man in Westbrook, Harold Blackwood, will visit St. Catherine's Academy tomorrow to announce a donation. His wealth is built on deception and suffering. His soul requires guidance." "What should we do?" Isabella asked anxiously. "You will know," Solomon assured them, now barely visible. "Trust the gift. Trust yourselves. Trust each other." With those words, he vanished completely, leaving only a lingering warmth in the air. The four teenagers stood in silence for a long moment, absorbing everything that had happened. They could feel their connection to the book, to the records, to each other, a bond forged in shared responsibility and newfound sight. "So," Alexandra finally said, her voice steady despite the enormity of what they'd undertaken, "Harold Blackwood, tomorrow." "The richest man in Westbrook," Olivia confirmed. "And apparently the most corrupt," Isabella added. Thomas thought about Solomon's final instructions. Trust the gift, trust themselves, trust each other. "We'll figure it out together," he said with quiet confidence. They ascended from the chamber, each carrying the weight of their new responsibility and the lightness of purpose. Outside, the night seemed different somehow, deeper, more vibrant, filled with the lights of countless souls moving through the darkness, each carrying their own stories, their own choices, their own potential for darkness and light. As they parted ways at the cathedral gate, Alexandra surprised them all by initiating a group hug, something the old Alexandra would never have done. "See you tomorrow," she said, her voice softer than they'd ever heard it. "Keepers." The next day dawned bright and clear. At St. Catherine's Academy, the entire student body assembled in the main hall for a special announcement. Harold Blackwood, billionaire developer and the city's most prominent citizen, stood on the stage beside the principal, his expensive suit and practiced smile projecting an image of benevolent success. The four new keepers sat together in the back row, their newfound sight allowing them to see what others could not. The darkness swirling around Blackwood, the shadows of his deeds clinging to him like a shroud. They could see the truth of his announcement. The donation to the school was a tax write-off. The new building he planned to name after himself would displace hundreds of low-income families. The charity foundation he spoke of so proudly was a shell for moving money offshore. "What do we do?" Isabella whispered, as Blackwood continued his speech, receiving applause from students and faculty who couldn't see what they saw. Thomas closed his eyes briefly, trusting the gift as Solomon had instructed. When he opened them again, he knew. "We show him his page." After the assembly, as Blackwood prepared to leave, the four teenagers approached him. To the casual observer, they looked like eager students seeking career advice or a selfie with a local celebrity. But as Alexandra reached out to shake Blackwood's hand, her touch transmitted a vision, a glimpse of his page in the Book of Witness, a summary of the suffering his greed had caused. Blackwood froze, his practiced smile faltering as he saw himself truly for the first time. What was that?" he stammered, pulling his hand away. "A gift, Mr. Blackwood," Alexandra replied calmly, "from the Keepers of Witness. Meet us at the old cathedral on 7th Street tonight at 8, Thomas added. "We have something that belongs to you." "Something you need to see," the twins said in unison. They turned and walked away, leaving Blackwood staring after them, shaken to his core by the brief glimpse of his true self. That evening, as darkness fell over Westbrook, Harold Blackwood's luxury car pulled up outside the cathedral. He sat inside for several minutes, debating whether to leave, to dismiss the strange encounter as a hallucination or a prank. But something deeper than curiosity compelled him forward, a need to understand what he had glimpsed, a hunger for truth he hadn't known he possessed. The four keepers waited inside, the book open between them, ready to offer not judgment, but witness, ready to guide another soul toward light through understanding rather than condemnation, ready to fulfill the responsibility they had accepted, together. For in the end, this was the greatest gift Solomon Pierce had given them. Not just the ability to see others truly, but to see themselves clearly as well. To recognize their capacity for cruelty and their potential for compassion. To understand that every soul, no matter how lost in darkness, carried a spark of light that could be nurtured, guided, witnessed. And as Harold Blackwood stepped through the cathedral doors, his expression a mixture of fear and hope, the four teenagers exchanged glances, silently acknowledging the journey they had begun, a journey of witness, of guidance, of growth, a journey that would transform not only the souls they touched, but their own souls as well. The richest man in Westbrook was about to be humbled by the gift of truth, and in that humbling, he would find the path to becoming truly wealthy in the ways that mattered most. The Book of Witness glowed between them, ready to reveal, ready to record, ready to guide. The new keepers stood ready as well, their inner light shining bright in the cathedral's sacred darkness, and somewhere beyond, Solomon Pierce smiled.